She served the wrong table at midnight, and every vampire in the room rose to their feet at once. The glass in Emily Carter's hand trembled as she set it down on polished black marble that did not belong to her section. The music did not stop, but something else did. Breath, movement, warmth. It felt as if the entire room had been pulled into a colder world where time moved slower and danger watched in silence. Emily blinked, confused, her heart beating hard against her ribs as dozens of pale faces turned toward her in perfect unison. No one spoke. No one needed to. The message was clear. She had made a mistake that could not be undone. She swallowed and forced a polite smile, the kind she had practiced through long shifts and worse nights, unaware that she had just crossed a line no human was meant to cross. Before continuing, comment where in the world you are watching from and make sure to subscribe because tomorrow's story is one you cannot miss. Emily had taken the midnight shift because it paid $2 more per hour and because fewer customers meant fewer chances to be yelled at. The restaurant sat on the edge of downtown, a place where the wealthy came late and stayed quiet. She had been warned about the back section. Table 13 was never on the floor plan. It appeared only after midnight, reserved without a name, always surrounded by guests who did not eat and barely moved. She had told herself not to look at them, not to think about the way the temperature dropped when they entered, not to notice how the manager avoided eye contact when they arrived. But tonight the orders had been mixed, the tickets printed wrong, and her feet had carried her to the wrong table before her mind could stop her. Now she stood there, a single human in a room that no longer felt human at all. The man seated at the center had not moved yet. He sat perfectly still, one hand resting beside the untouched glass she had placed before him. His suit was black, absorbing the dim light, his presence heavier than anything she had ever felt. Emily dared to glance at his face. Sharp features, pale skin, eyes that were not looking at the room, but directly at her. And then, slowly, he stood. The movement was effortless, controlled, and absolute. As he rose, every other vampire in the room straightened further, their posture shifting from curiosity to something closer to reverence. Emily felt it before she understood it. This was not just another guest. This was the reason they had all stood. The air tightened around her as his gaze locked onto hers, not with anger, not with hunger, but with something far more unsettling. Recognition. Emily took a step back, her pulse racing, her mind searching for an explanation that did not exist. She had served the wrong table, but somehow it felt like the table had been waiting for her. Emily Carter could not move. The space between her and the man felt thinner than air, as if one wrong breath would break something invisible and irreversible. Her fingers tightened around the empty tray, the edges pressing into her palms, grounding her in the only reality she understood. Work, routine, survival. But none of those rules applied here anymore. The man in front of her stepped closer, and the sound of his shoes against the marble floor echoed far louder than it should have. Each step carried weight, not just physical, but something deeper, something ancient that pressed against her chest and slowed her breathing. She instinctively took another step back until the back of her leg brushed against the edge of a chair. No one else moved. The entire room remained frozen in a silent, watching tension, as if every person present was waiting for permission to exist again. Emily lowered her gaze, remembering the manager's warnings. Do not look at them. Do not speak unless spoken to. Do not draw attention. But it was too late for all of that. She had already done the one thing she was never supposed to do. I am sorry, sir, she said, her voice soft but steady, shaped by years of forcing calm through fear. I brought this to the wrong table. I will fix it right away. The words sounded small the moment they left her mouth, swallowed by the vast silence. For a second, nothing happened. Then his voice came, low and controlled, each word deliberate. You think this is about a drink? Emily's breath caught. There was no anger in his tone, no raised volume, but something in the way he spoke made the air feel heavier, like a storm building just out of sight. She hesitated, unsure whether to answer, unsure whether answering would make things worse. Around them, The other vampires remained standing, their eyes shifting between her and the man, waiting, watching, measuring. Emily forced herself to nod once. "Yes, sir." Another silence followed, longer this time. The man studied her with an intensity that made her feel exposed in a way she could not explain. Not like he was looking at her clothes or her face, but something deeper, something beneath the surface. As if he were searching for something that should not be there. His gaze dropped briefly to her hand where the edge of the tray had pressed too hard. A thin line of red marked her skin, barely visible, but enough. His eyes changed. Not color, not shape, but focus. Sharper, colder, and something else. Recognition again, but stronger now. He reached out, not fast, not threatening, just precise, and took her wrist gently before she could react. The contact sent a shock through her body. Not pain, not exactly, but a sudden awareness that spread from her skin to her chest. The room reacted instantly. Several vampires shifted, tension spiking, as if they had witnessed something forbidden. Emily froze, her pulse racing as she stared at his hand around her wrist. His touch was cool, almost cold, but steady. Grounded. "What is your name?" he asked quietly. Emily swallowed. "Emily Carter." The name felt too ordinary in this place, too human. He repeated it under his breath, as if testing it. "Emily Carter." Then his thumb brushed lightly against the faint mark on her skin. The reaction was immediate. A subtle glow, almost invisible, flickered beneath the surface of her skin, gone so quickly she might have imagined it. But he had seen it. The room had felt it. A whisper moved through the standing vampires, too quiet to form words, but heavy with meaning. One of them stepped forward, voice tense. "My lord, this is not safe." The man did not look away from Emily. "I did not ask for your opinion." The authority in his voice cut through the room like ice, and the vampire stepped back instantly, head lowering. Emily's heart pounded. "My lord." The word echoed in her mind, connecting pieces she had tried not to see. The way they stood, the way they watched. Him, the way the air itself seemed to obey him. Her stomach dropped. "You are their leader," she whispered before she could stop herself. His eyes met hers fully now, and for the first time, something almost human flickered there. Not warmth, not softness, but something close to acknowledgement. "I'm the reason they are standing," he said. The truth settled over her like cold water. She had not just served the wrong table. She had walked directly into the center of something far beyond her understanding. His grip on her wrist loosened slightly, but he did not let go. Instead, he leaned in just enough for only her to hear. "You should not have come to this table tonight." Emily's voice trembled despite her effort to stay steady. "I did not mean to." "I know," he replied. "That is why you are still alive." The words were not a threat. They were a fact. And somehow, that made them far more terrifying. Around them, the room remained silent, every vampire still standing, waiting for what he would do next. And for the first time, Emily realized that whatever happened now would not just decide her job. It would decide everything. Emily Carter felt the shift before she understood it. The silence in a room was no longer just tension. It was expectation. Every eye remained fixed on her, but no one dared to move without permission. The man still held her wrist, his grip steady, not tight, but absolute. It was not restraint. It was control. Her mind raced, trying to catch up with everything she had just realized. "My lord." The word echoed again, louder now, heavier, carrying meaning she could not ignore anymore. She had heard rumors, of course. Everyone in the late shift had. About certain guests who came only after midnight. About people who were not exactly people. About a hierarchy that no one explained, but everyone respected. She had laughed it off before, the way people do when reality feels too strange to accept. But nothing about this felt like a rumor anymore. This was real, and she was standing at the center of it. The man released her wrist slowly, but his hand did not move far. It hovered for a fraction of a second, as if he were resisting something unseen, before returning to his side. The absence of his touch should have felt like relief. Instead, It left behind a strange emptiness that unsettled her even more. You said you came here for work, he continued, his voice calm, measured, carrying effortlessly across the silent room. Emily nodded quickly. Yes, sir. I am just a server. I did not know this section was reserved. A faint reaction passed through some of the vampires, not quite amusement, not quite disbelief. Just enough to remind her that nothing she said sounded normal here. The man studied her again, longer this time, as if weighing every word, every breath. Then he turned his head slightly, addressing the room without raising his voice. She did not know. That was all he said, but it was enough. The tension shifted instantly. Not gone, but redirected. Some of the vampires lowered their gazes. Others stepped back half an inch, as if the invisible line around her had just been redrawn. Emily blinked, trying to understand what had just happened. He had spoken for her, protected her, without hesitation. That did not make sense. Not her world. Not for someone like him. Why? She asked before she could stop herself. The question slipped out, fragile but real. Why are you helping me? The room stilled again. This time, the silence felt sharper, more dangerous. Questions were not something she was supposed to ask. Not here. Not to him. For a brief moment, something flickered across his face. Not anger. Not irritation. Something closer to curiosity. As if no one had asked him that question in a very long time. I have not decided that I am helping you, he replied. The answer was honest. Too honest. Emily felt her stomach tighten. Then why? She pressed, her voice softer now, but steady because if she was already in danger, silence would not save her. His gaze dropped again to her hand, to the faint mark that had already begun to fade. Because something about you should not exist. The words settled heavily between them. Emily frowned slightly, confusion cutting through her fear. I did not understand. Neither do I, he said quietly. That was the most unsettling part. Around them, the vampires exchanged subtle glances, tension building again beneath the surface. One woman in a dark gown stepped forward, her voice controlled, but edged with urgency. My lord, if there is even a chance that she carries a trace, we cannot allow her to remain here unexamined. Emily's breath caught. A trace of what? The man did not look at the woman. His attention never left Emily. Your concern is noted, he said, his tone final. But you will not act without my command. The woman hesitated, then bowed her head slightly and stepped back, though the unease in her expression remained. Emily felt the weight of that exchange settle over her. Whatever they thought she was, it was not something simple, and it was not something safe. The man took one step closer again, closing the distance just enough to make her heart race. Listen carefully, Emily Carter, he said, her name sounding different in his voice, heavier, more deliberate. From this moment forward, you do not speak to anyone in this room unless I allow it. You do not leave unless I say so. And you do not attempt to run. Emily swallowed hard. I was not planning to run. A faint, almost imperceptible shift touched his expression. Not quite a smile. Not quite anything human. Good, he said. Because if you did, they would not wait for my permission. The implication hung in the air, cold and clear. Emily nodded slowly, understanding settling into her bones. She was not a guest here. She was not staff anymore. She was something else entirely. Something unknown. Something watched. The man straightened slightly, his presence expanding once more to fill the room. You may all sit, he said. The effect was immediate. Every vampire lowered back into their seats in perfect unison, as if a spell had been released. The room breathed again. The music resumed, softer now, almost cautious. But nothing was the same. Emily stood there, alone in the center of a world she did not belong to, as the man who controlled it all looked at her like she was the only thing that mattered. And somewhere deep inside, a quiet, terrifying thought began to form. This was not an accident, and whatever had just started was not going to end when her shift did. The music returned, but it no longer sounded like music to Emily Carter. It felt distant, hollow, as if the sound itself was afraid to fill the room too loudly. Glasses clinked again, quiet conversations resumed, and yet every movement carried a strange restraint, like the entire restaurant had shifted into a different rhythm, a controlled one, a watched one. Emily stood exactly where she had been, unsure if she was allowed to move, unsure if moving would break whatever invisible rule was now wrapped around her. Her tray still rested in her hands, but it no longer felt like part of her job. It felt like a prop from a life that had just ended. "You will continue your duties," the man said without looking away from her. The instruction was simple, almost normal, but nothing about this situation was normal. Emily blinked, caught between instinct and fear. Serve. Smile. Walk away. That was what she was supposed to do. That was what she had always done. "Yes, sir," she said quietly, her voice steady even as her thoughts raced. She turned slowly, forcing her legs to move, each step careful, measured, as if the floor itself might react to her presence. The moment she stepped away from the table, she felt it. Eyes. Not all of them, but enough. Some watched openly. Others pretended not to. But the awareness was constant, pressing against her back like a silent warning. Emily returned to the service station, placing the empty tray down with hands that were almost steady. Almost. Her co-worker, Daniel, stood there, frozen mid-motion, staring at her like he had just seen something impossible. "What did you do?" he whispered, his voice barely audible. Emily shook her head slightly. "I served the wrong table." Daniel let out a breath that sounded more like disbelief than relief. "That is not just a wrong table, Emily. That is his table." The words landed heavily, confirming what she already knew but had not fully allowed herself to accept. She glanced back toward the section, just for a second, and instantly regretted it. The man was still watching her. Not casually, not by chance, deliberately, as if every step she took still mattered to him. Emily looked away quickly, her pulse picking up again. "Just do your job," Daniel muttered, more to himself than to her. "Do not make it worse." Emily nodded, grabbing another order ticket, even though the words blurred together for a moment before her eyes adjusted. Table 7. 2 entrees. Normal. Safe. She moved, forcing herself back into routine, weaving through tables, placing plates, offering polite smiles. But something had changed. The space around her felt different. Warmer in some places, colder in others. And every time she passed near the back section, she felt a pull. Subtle, but undeniable. Like gravity shifting in a direction she could not see. She reached table 7 and placed the plates carefully. "Enjoy your meal," she said, her voice controlled, her expression calm. The guests thanked her, normal, human, unaware of the world unfolding just a few feet away. For a brief moment, Emily clung to that normalcy. It felt fragile now, temporary. As she turned to leave, a sudden drop in temperature brushed against her skin again. Not as sharp as before, not as shocking, but enough to make her pause. She did not need to look to know what had caused it. He had moved. Emily continued walking, but slower now, her awareness sharpening with each step. The room had not reacted this time. No one stood. No one spoke. But the shift was there, subtle, controlled. Intentional. She reached the edge of the service station and stopped, her breath catching as she felt it again. Presence. Close. Too close. "You are adjusting quickly." His voice came from behind her, low and calm, as if he had always been standing there. Emily turned slowly, her heart pounding, and found him just a few feet away, his posture relaxed, his expression unreadable. The distance between them felt smaller now, more dangerous, because it no longer felt accidental. "I am trying to do my job," she said, her voice quieter this time, more careful. He studied her for a moment, then glanced briefly at the surrounding tables before returning his attention to her. "Your job no longer applies in the way you think it does," he said. Emily frowned slightly, confusion mixing with unease. "I still work here." "Not tonight," he replied. The certainty in his voice left no room for argument. A subtle tension moved through the nearby space, as if even the air reacted to his words. Emily felt it settle over her, heavier than before. "Then what am I supposed to do?" she asked, the question slipping out before she could stop it. His gaze softened just slightly not enough to be called gentle, but enough to change something in the space between them. "You stay where I can see you," he said. The simplicity of the command made it more unsettling than any threat. Emily stared at him, her breath shallow, her mind struggling to keep up. Stay where he could see her. Not leave. Not run. Not disappear back in her life. The realization settled slowly, deeply. She was not being allowed to return to normal. She was being kept. And as the room continued around them, unaware or unwilling to interfere, Emily Carter understood one thing with terrifying clarity. Serving the wrong table had not been a mistake. It had been the moment everything changed. Emily Carter did not move. The words stayed where they had landed, heavy and absolute, echoing in her mind long after he had spoken them. "You stay where I can see you." It was not a suggestion. It was not even a warning. It was a rule, spoken as if it had always existed and she had just now become aware of it. Her fingers curled slightly at her sides, grounding herself in the only thing she still recognized, her own body, her own breath. The restaurant continued around them, but it felt distant now, like she was standing behind glass watching a version of her life that no longer included her. Conversations resumed, plates moved, glasses lifted, but everything carried that same careful restraint, as if every person in the room was aware that something had shifted and no one wanted to be the one to disturb it again. Emily forced herself to speak, because silence felt more dangerous than words. "I still have tables," she said quietly, her voice controlled, but there was a question buried in it, one she could not fully hide. His gaze did not change. "They will be reassigned." The answer came immediately, as if the decision had already been made before she asked. Emily blinked. "That is not how this place works," she said, almost to herself, because nothing about this matched the rules she knew. He tilted his head slightly, studying her again with that same unsettling focus. "It is now." The certainty in his voice left no space for argument, and yet something in Emily resisted. Not rebellion, not defiance, just a quiet, stubborn instinct that refused to disappear completely. "I need this job," she said, the words slipping out before she could stop them. It was the first real thing she had said to him, not polite, not careful, just honest. For a brief moment, the air between them shifted again, not colder, not warmer, just different. He watched her more closely now, as if that single sentence had revealed more than everything else she had said combined. "Why?" he asked. The question was simple, but it carried weight. Emily hesitated, her throat tightening slightly. "Because I do not have anything else," she said. "Rent, bills, survival." She did not say the words out loud, but they were there, hanging between them, understood even without being spoken. His expression did not soften, but something in his posture changed, almost imperceptible, like a shift in balance. "You think this place is what is keeping you alive?" he said quietly. Emily frowned slightly, confusion flickering across her face. "It is," she replied. "Without it, I do not make it through the month." The statement was plain, grounded in a reality that had always been simple, always been clear. Work meant money. Money meant survival. That was how her world worked. He looked at her for a long moment, and then something unexpected happened. He stepped back, not far, just enough to create space again. The sudden distance felt just as controlled as his closeness had been. "Then you misunderstand your position," he said. The words settled slowly, each one precise. Emily felt her chest tighten. "What position?" she asked. His gaze lifted slightly, scanning the room for a fraction of a second before returning to her. The entire restaurant seemed to hold its breath again without realizing it. Then he answered, "Mine." The word landed with a weight that did not feel metaphorical. It felt real, solid, binding. Emily stared at him, her mind struggling to process what he had just said. "I am not," she started, but the sentence faltered before it could form fully, because something inside her recognized the truth before she could deny it. Not ownership in the way she feared, not control in the way she expected, but something else, something deeper, something that felt like a line had been drawn around her, and everything inside that line now belonged to his protection whether she agreed or not. Around them, subtle movements rippled through the room. A server approached the station, hesitated when she saw them, then turned away without speaking. Another staff member quietly removed the order tickets from Emily's section, redistributing them without a word. No one asked for permission. No one questioned it. It simply happened. Emily noticed it all, her breath slowing as realization settled in piece by piece. This was not just about him. This was about everyone else responding to him. Instantly. Completely. Without hesitation. She looked back at him, her voice quieter now, more careful. You cannot just decide that. He met her gaze without blinking. I already did. The simplicity of the answer left no room for doubt. Emily's pulse quickened again, but this time it was not just fear. It was something more complicated. Something she could not name yet. You do not even know me, she said. A faint shift touched his expression again, something almost thoughtful. I know enough, he replied. Emily shook her head slightly, frustration slipping through despite everything. No, you do not. You just met me. His eyes held hers, steady, unwavering. That is where you are wrong. The quiet certainty in his voice sent a chill through her that had nothing to do with temperature. For the first time since this began, Emily felt something new rise beneath the fear. Not panic, not confusion, suspicion. What do you mean, she asked. He did not answer right away. Instead, his gaze dropped once more to her hand, to the place where the faint mark had been. It was gone now, completely, as if it had never existed. But the memory of it lingered in both of them. Then he looked back up at her, and when he spoke again, his voice was lower, more deliberate. Because you are not supposed to be here tonight. Emily's breath caught. The words did not sound like an observation. They sounded like a contradiction, like something had gone wrong in a way that neither of them fully understood. And in that moment, standing in the middle of a restaurant that no longer felt like a restaurant, Emily Carter realized something far more unsettling than anything that had happened so far. This was not just his world, and she had not just entered it by accident. Emily Carter felt the weight of his last words settle into her chest, heavy and unyielding. You are not supposed to be here tonight. It did not sound like an accusation. It sounded like a broken rule, like something had shifted outside of both of their control. The room around them continued its quiet rhythm, but beneath it, something else had begun to move. Subtle, controlled, watching. Emily opened her mouth to respond, but before she could speak, a new presence entered the space. It was not loud. It did not announce itself, but it was felt instantly like a sudden drop in pressure before a storm. A man stepped forward from the far side of the room, his posture straight, his expression composed, but his eyes sharp with calculation. He stopped a few feet away from them and inclined his head slightly. My lord, he said, his voice calm but edged with urgency. We need to speak. The shift was immediate. The space around Emily tightened again, not from the man in front of her, but from the one beside her. Lucien Voss did not turn right away. His gaze remained on Emily for one more second, as if making a decision that no one else could see. Then, slowly he stepped back. The distance returned. The invisible line redrew itself. Stay here, he said quietly to her. Emily nodded without thinking, her body responding before her mind could question it. Yes, sir. Only then did he turn toward the other man. The difference was instant. The calm focus he had held with her shifted into something colder, sharper, more distant. You have something that cannot wait, he said. It was not a question. The other man glanced briefly at Emily, just for a fraction of a second, but it was enough. Suspicion, concern, calculation. Then his attention returned to Lucien. It concerns her, he said. The words landed like a stone in still water. Emily felt it ripple through the space, subtle but undeniable. Lucien's expression did not change, but something in his posture hardened. Speak. The man hesitated, then lowered his voice slightly, though not enough to hide it completely. The reaction from the court is spreading. They felt the surge. There are already questions being asked about what she is. Emily's breath caught. What she is. Not who. What. The distinction was not lost on her. Lucien remained still, his gaze unreadable. And what do they believe? He asked. The man's jaw tightened slightly. Some believe it is a coincidence. Others do not. There are those who think this could be connected to the old records. The old records. The phrase lingered in the air, heavy with meaning that Emily could not fully grasp but could feel. All the same, Lucien's eyes darkened slightly, the only visible sign that the words had reached something deeper. There are no records that apply to this situation, he said. The certainty in his voice was firm, but not absolute. Not like before. The other man did not argue, but he did not step back either. With respect, my lord, we have not seen a reaction like this in over a century. The room may appear calm, but it is not. If word spreads beyond this location, it will not remain contained. Emily stood frozen, her pulse racing as she listened, every word pulling her further into something she did not understand. Over a century. Reaction. Records. None of it made sense, but all of it felt connected to her. Lucien glanced briefly toward the rest of the room. The vampires were still seated, still composed, but there was tension beneath the surface now. Eyes that lingered too long. Movements that were just slightly too careful. He saw it. He understood it. And for the first time, Emily saw something she had not expected in him. Not fear, but awareness of risk. He turned back to the man in front of him. This remains under my authority, he said. No one acts. No one speaks. Not until I decide what this is. The command settled over the space with quiet finality. The man inclined his head again, but his expression did not fully relax. Understood, my lord. But you should know, there are already those who will not wait. The warning hung in the air. Lucien did not respond immediately. Instead, his gaze shifted back to Emily once more. The look was different now. More focused. More deliberate. As if the situation had moved beyond curiosity into something more dangerous. Something that required control. Emily felt at the moment his attention returned to her. The invisible line around her tightened again, stronger this time. Not just protection. Containment. Then we move before they do, Lucien said quietly. The decision had been made. Emily's stomach dropped. Move where? She asked, the words slipping out before she could stop them. Both men looked at her. The silence that followed was not empty. It was heavy with everything she did not yet know. Lucien stepped toward her again, closing the distance with that same controlled precision. Away from here, he said. The answer was simple, but it carried weight that stretched far beyond the walls of the restaurant. Emily's pulse quickened, her mind racing. I cannot just leave, she said. I have a shift. The words sounded almost absurd the moment she said them, but they were the only thing that still felt real. Lucien's gaze softened just slightly, not with comfort, but with understanding of something she was holding on to. Your shift ended the moment you walked to my table, he said. The truth of it settled in instantly, not because it made sense, but because everything else already had. Around them, the room continued to move, but it no longer felt like a place she could stay. Emily Carter stood there, caught between the life she had known and the one unfolding in front of her, and for the first time, the choice was no longer hers to make. Emily Carter felt the world narrow to a single point as his words settled into place. Your shift ended the moment you walked to my table. The sentence did not echo. It did not need to. It stayed where it was, heavy and final, pressing against everything she had believed about control, about choice, about the simple idea that she could walk away from a job when the night was over. Around them, the restaurant continued its careful performance, but now Emily could see it clearly. It was not normal movement. It was containment. Conversations were quieter. Movements were measured. And every few seconds, someone glanced in her direction, then quickly looked away as if they had seen something they were not supposed to acknowledge. Emily shook her head slightly, her voice low but firm. I did not agree to this. The words felt small compared to the space they were in, but they were real. They were hers. For a brief moment, something changed in Lucien's expression. Not anger, not amusement, something closer to recognition. He stepped closer again, not invading, not forcing, just enough to be heard without raising his voice. You believe agreement matters here, he said. Emily held his gaze, even as her pulse raced. It should. The answer came quickly, instinctively, because in her world it did. Consent, choice, the ability to say no. Those were the rules she understood. Lucian studied her for a long second, as if weighing something beyond her words. Then he spoke again, quieter now, but more deliberate. It does matter. That was not the answer she expected. Emily blinked, caught off guard. Then why does it not feel like I have a choice, she asked. The question hung between them, fragile but undeniable. For the first time, Lucian did not answer immediately. His gaze shifted slightly, not away from her, but inward, as if he were considering something he had not needed to consider in a very long time. Because the choice was already made before you understood it, he said finally. The words were calm, but they carried weight that reached deeper than anything else he had said. Emily felt a chill move through her, not from fear but from something else. Something that felt dangerously close to truth. Before she could respond, a sudden shift rippled through the room again. It was subtle, but stronger than before. A tension that did not come from Lucian. A tension that did not ask for permission. Emily turned her head slightly, her instincts reacting before her thoughts could catch up. At the far end of the room, one of the vampires had stood. Not in unison, not in response to Lucian. On his own. The difference was immediate. The room noticed. Conversations faltered. Movement slowed. The invisible structure that had held everything in place cracked just enough to be felt. The vampire stepped forward, his expression controlled, but his eyes sharp with something far less contained. Curiosity, defiance, hunger for answers. My lord, he said, his voice carrying just enough to reach them. Forgive the interruption, but some of us are not willing to wait. The words landed heavily, cutting through the controlled silence like a fracture line spreading through glass. Emily felt her breath catch. This was different. This was not part of the order Lucian had established. Lucian did not turn right away. His posture remained still, but something in the air shifted around him, colder, sharper, more dangerous than before. You were given an instruction, he said, his voice low but carrying across the room without effort. The standing vampire did not sit. That alone was enough to change everything. And I am asking for clarity, he replied. The tension spiked instantly. Several others shifted in their seats. Not rising. Not yet. But close. Watching. Waiting. Emily felt it build, the pressure rising in the room like something about to break. Lucian turned slowly then, his gaze locking onto the one who had stood. The temperature seemed to drop again, sharper this time, more defined. You're not asking, Lucian said. The correction was quiet, but absolute. The other vampire held his ground for a fraction of a second too long. And in that moment, Emily understood something she had not fully grasped before. Power here was not loud. It was not chaotic. It was precise, controlled. And when it was challenged, even slightly, the consequences were immediate. Lucian took one step forward. That was all it took. The standing vampire froze. Not physically restrained. Not forced. But something in his posture changed instantly, as if his body had remembered something his mind had forgotten. Seat. The command was not raised. It was not emphasized. But it carried a force that pressed into the room itself. The vampire sat. Immediately. Completely. The tension broke, but it did not disappear. It settled lower, deeper, more dangerous. Emily exhaled slowly, her chest tight, her thoughts racing. That was not normal. None of this was normal. And yet, she had just watched it happen as if it were the most natural thing in the world. Lucian turned back to her, the shift in his focus immediate, as if nothing had interrupted them at all. But Emily could see it now. Beneath the calm, beneath the control, this situation was no longer contained. They're losing patience, she said quietly. It was not a question. It was an observation. Lucian's gaze held hers, steady and unshaken. They are afraid of what they do not understand, he said. Emily swallowed. And what am I, she asked. The question felt heavier now, more real, more dangerous than before. Lucian did not hesitate this time. That is what we are about to find out. The answer did not comfort her. It did not reassure her. It confirmed something far worse. This was no longer about a mistake. This was about something that had already begun. And as the room settled into a quieter, more fragile silence, Emily Carter realized that whatever protection Lucien had offered her was not just keeping others away. It was holding something much larger in place, something that would not stay contained for long. The silence after Lucien's words did not feel like calm. It felt like the moment before something broke. Emily Carter stood where she was, her breath slow but uneven, her awareness stretched thin across every movement in the room. They are afraid of what they do not understand. The sentence lingered in her mind, repeating itself with quiet insistence. And now she understood something else. Fear did not always look like panic. Here it looked like control, slipping 1 inch at a time. At the far side of the room, the vampire who had challenged Lucien no longer moved, but his stillness was different now. Not obedient, restrained. Around him, others shifted subtly, their attention sharpening, their posture tightening just enough to reveal what they were trying to hide. They were watching her, not casually, not with curiosity alone, with calculation. Emily felt it settle into her skin, that awareness of being measured, of being something under observation rather than someone. She swallowed, her voice barely above a whisper. "This is about me," she said. It was not a question. Lucien did not deny it. Yes. The directness of his answer removed any illusion she might have held on to. Emily let out a slow breath, her fingers curling slightly at her sides. "Then you need to tell me what is happening," she said. Her voice was steadier now, not because she felt safe, but because uncertainty had become worse than fear. Lucien studied her, and for a brief moment, something shifted in his expression again. Not hesitation, something closer to consideration. Then his gaze moved past her, scanning the room once more, as if measuring how much time they had left. "Not here," he said. The words were quiet but firm. Emily's chest tightened. "Then where?" she asked. Before he could answer, the air changed again. This time it was sharper, more immediate, not a ripple, a fracture. A woman rose from her seat near the center of the room, her movement smooth, deliberate, and completely outside the control Lucien had just reestablished. She did not hesitate. She did not wait. She stepped forward, her eyes fixed on Emily with a focus that made Emily's pulse spike instantly. "My lord," the woman said, her tone respectful, but her posture was not. There was no bow, no lowering of her gaze, only intent. "We cannot continue to pretend this is contained." The room reacted again, tension snapping tighter, several heads turning, attention locking onto the woman. This was no longer a single act of defiance. This was escalation. Lucien's presence shifted instantly, the calm control hardening into something colder, something far more dangerous. "You are crossing a line," he said. The warning was quiet but absolute. The woman did not step back. "With respect, my lord, that line has already been crossed," she replied. Her gaze flicked briefly toward Emily, then returned to him. "Whatever she is, it is not stable. The reaction is growing. You felt it. We all did." Emily's breath caught. The reaction. Again, the same word. The same unknown force that everyone else seemed to understand except her. Lucien took a slow step forward, placing himself slightly between Emily and the woman without making it obvious. The movement was subtle, but intentional. Protective. Controlled. "You will choose your next words carefully," he said. The woman's expression did not change, but something in her stance shifted, tension pulling tight beneath the surface. "Then answer me this," she said. "If she is nothing, why did the room respond?" The question cut through the space, sharp and undeniable. No one spoke. No one moved. Even the music seemed to fade into the background as if it no longer belonged. Emily felt her heart pound against her ribs, her mind racing. Respond to what? To her. To him. To something else entirely. Lucien did not answer right away, and that silence was more revealing than any response. The woman took one step closer. "Then prove it," she said. The words landed like a challenge. Like a test. The room reacted instantly. Several vampires shifted forward in their seats. Not rising. Not yet. But ready. Watching. Waiting. Emily felt the tension spike, sharper than anything before. This was no longer contained. This was no longer controlled. This was a moment where something would be decided. Lucien's gaze hardened, his focus locking onto the woman with a precision that left no room for misunderstanding. "You are asking me to demonstrate authority," he said. It was not a question. It was a recognition of what she had just done. The woman held his gaze. "I am asking you to confirm that she does not change the rules," she replied. Emily felt her chest tighten. "Change the rules." The phrase echoed through her mind, heavier than anything else that had been said, because it meant something had already changed. Lucien was silent for one long second. Then he turned slightly, just enough that his presence fully aligned between Emily and the rest of the room. The shift was immediate, absolute. The invisible line around her became something real, tangible. "Do not mistake restraint for uncertainty," he said quietly. The temperature in the room dropped sharply, the air tightening as his voice carried across every corner without effort. "No one here will test that distinction." The force behind the words was not loud. It was final. The woman held his gaze for one fraction of a second longer. Then slowly, she stepped back, not in defeat, but in recognition. The line had been redrawn. Again, the room exhaled, tension lowering slightly, but not disappearing. Not this time. Emily stood there, her breath uneven, her mind struggling to catch up with everything that had just happened. This was not about a mistake anymore. This was about something that was pulling everyone into conflict. And as Lucien's presence settled back into place, controlled but sharper than before, Emily Carter realized one thing with terrifying clarity. Whatever had started the moment she touched that table, it was no longer just his decision. Others were already preparing to challenge it. The line had been redrawn, but the room did not forget what had just happened. Emily Carter could feel it in the way the air still pressed against her skin, in the way every movement around her carried a fraction too much control, as if restraint itself had become fragile. Lucien stood in front of her, not touching, not blocking, but present in a way that made it clear she was not meant to be reached. Not by them. Not anymore. The woman who had challenged him had stepped back, but her gaze had not softened. It remained fixed, sharp, calculating, as if she were already planning the next move. And she was not alone. Emily noticed it now, the subtle alignment of attention across the room. Not open defiance. Not yet, but something quieter. Agreement. Curiosity turning into intent. The kind that did not wait forever. Emily swallowed, her voice low, controlled. "This is getting worse," she said. It was not fear speaking now. It was observation. Lucien did not look away from the room as he answered. "Yes." The single word carried no comfort, only confirmation. Emily let out a slow breath, forcing her thoughts into something steady. "Then you cannot keep me here," she said. The statement came out clearer than she expected. Not a plea, a conclusion. Lucien turned his head slightly toward her, his gaze sharpening. "That is precisely why I will not leave you here," he said. The shift in his words was immediate. Emily felt it. Not keep, not stay, leave. The meaning changed everything. Before she could respond, Lucien moved. The motion was smooth, controlled, but final. He stepped forward, closing the space between them, then turned slightly, positioning himself at her side rather than in front of her. The angle changed her perspective instantly. The room was no longer something she faced alone. It was something they faced together. "We are leaving," he said. The words were not loud, but they carried across the entire room without resistance. The effect was immediate. Conversation stopped. Glasses lowered. Every vampire present turned their attention toward him again. But this time no one stood. No one moved. The tension tightened instead, deeper, more dangerous. The woman in the dark gown took a slow step forward again, her expression calm but firm. "My lord, that would be unwise," she said. There was no challenge in her tone now, only warning. Lucien did not look at her. "Unwise for whom?" he asked. The question was quiet, but it cut through the space with precision. The woman held his gaze. "For all of us." The answer lingered, heavy with implication. Emily felt her pulse quicken. This was not just about her anymore. This was about something larger. something that affected all of them. Lucien's expression did not change, but something in the air around him sharpened again. That concern has already been noted, he said, and it has been dismissed. The finality in his voice left no room for interpretation. The woman's eyes narrowed slightly, not in anger, but in calculation. "Then you force our hand," she replied. The words were quiet, but they carried further than anything else she had said. The room reacted instantly. Not movement, not yet, but a shift in intent. Emily felt it like a current running beneath the surface. This was no longer tension. This was a threshold. Lucien's posture straightened slightly, his presence expanding in a way that made the entire space feel smaller. "No," he said, "you are choosing to test a boundary that has already been made clear." The correction was precise, controlled, and absolute. The woman did not respond immediately. Instead, her gaze flicked toward Emily again, lingering just long enough to make the meaning clear. "This is not over." Emily felt a chill move through her, but she did not look away. Not this time. Something inside her had shifted as well. Not strength, not yet, but awareness. She understood now that whatever she was, whatever had triggered this reaction, it was not something that could be ignored or undone. Lucien's hand moved then, not fast, not forceful, but certain. He reached for her wrist again, his touch steady, grounding, pulling her slightly closer to his side. "Stay with me," he said quietly. The words were meant only for her, but they carried a weight that settled deeper than anything else he had said. Emily nodded once, her breath steadying despite everything. Around them, the room remained still, but the stillness was no longer controlled. It was held, contained, barely. Lucien began to move, guiding her forward with calm precision, each step measured, deliberate, as they crossed the floor. No one stepped in front of them. No one spoke, but the awareness followed them, pressing in from every direction. Eyes tracking, minds calculating. The exit at the far end of the room had never felt so distant. Each step toward it felt like crossing an invisible line that could break at any moment. Emily felt her pulse in her throat, her senses sharp, every instinct telling her that this was not just leaving a building. This was leaving something unfinished, something that would not stay behind. As they reached the edge of the room, Lucien slowed slightly, his gaze lifting just enough to sweep across the entire space one last time. The message was clear without being spoken. This is not a request. Then he stepped forward again, guiding Emily toward the door. And behind them, in the quiet that followed, something shifted. Not visible, not immediate, but inevitable. Because the moment they walked out, the control that had held the room together would no longer be his alone. The door opened without a sound. Emily Carter felt it before she saw it. The shift in air pressure, the sudden absence of the room behind her, and the unknown stretching out ahead. The moment her foot crossed the threshold, something changed. Not just in the space, but in the weight pressing against her chest. The tension behind them did not disappear. It followed. Lucien's hand remained steady around her wrist, guiding but not forcing, his pace unhurried, controlled, as if nothing in the world could interrupt the path he had chosen. The hallway beyond the restaurant was dim, lined with dark walls that seemed to absorb the light rather than reflect it. The sounds of the dining room faded quickly, replaced by a deeper silence, one that felt older, heavier, untouched by the surface world above. Emily glanced back once, just for a second. The door had already closed. Whatever had been inside that room was now separated from her, but the feeling of it lingered like a storm waiting on the other side of glass. They did not stop. Lucien continued forward, his steps precise, his presence filling the narrow space in a way that made it feel impossible for anything else to exist there with them. Emily swallowed, her voice low. "Where are we going?" Lucien did not slow. "Somewhere they cannot reach you," he said. The answer was simple, but it carried an edge that made her pulse quicken. Cannot reach you. Not will not. Cannot. That meant there were limits. That meant there were things even he was choosing to avoid. Emily tightened her grip slightly on her own hand, grounding herself again. "You said they were afraid," she said. "That means they might not listen to you." Lucien's gaze flicked toward her briefly, sharp and assessing, then returned forward. Fear makes people unpredictable, he said. It does not make them foolish. Emily let that settle. It did not feel like reassurance. It felt like preparation. They reached the end of the hallway, where a set of heavy doors stood closed, darker than everything around them. Lucien did not hesitate. He pushed one open, and a rush of cool night air met them instantly. The outside world waited beyond, but did not feel like the city she knew. The street was empty. Not quiet. Empty. No cars. No voices. No distant hum of traffic. Just stillness, stretching in every direction. Emily stepped out beside him, her breath catching as the cold air hit her skin. "This is not normal," she said softly. "No," Lucien replied. "It is controlled." The distinction mattered. Emily could feel it now. The absence of randomness. The way the world around them felt cleared rather than abandoned. This was not coincidence. This was intention. A black car waited at the curb, its surface reflecting almost no light, its presence as silent as everything else around them. The driver stood beside it, already opening the rear door before they reached it. He did not look at Emily. He did not speak. He only inclined his head toward Lucien. "My lord." Lucien gave a slight nod, then turned to Emily. "Get in." The instruction was calm, but it carried the same weight as everything else he had said. Emily hesitated for the first time since they had left the room. The car looked ordinary, but nothing about this night had been ordinary. "If I get in," she said quietly, her eyes searching his. "I'm not going back to my life." The words were not a question. They were a realization. Lucien met her gaze, steady and unwavering. "Not tonight," he said. The honesty in his answer removed any illusion she might have held on to. Emily felt her chest tighten, but she did not look away. "Then tell me something real," she said. "Not about them. Not about what I am. About you." "Why me?" The question hung between them, heavier than anything she had asked before. Lucien was silent for a moment. Then he stepped closer, just enough that his voice did not need to rise. "Because when your blood touched me," he said quietly, something responded that has not existed in over 100 years. Emily felt her breath catch. The memory flashed instantly. The faint mark. The brief glow. The reaction she had barely believed was real. "That is not possible," she said. "It is not supposed to be," he replied. The words settled deep, pulling everything else into place. The room. The reaction. The tension. The fear. This was not just about her presence. It was about what she had done without knowing. Emily looked at the open car door, then back at him. "And if they are right," she said slowly, "if I am something they're afraid of." Lucien's expression did not change, but his voice lowered slightly. "Then I will be the only thing they fear more." The promise was quiet, absolute, not dramatic, not exaggerated, just true. Emily felt it in the way the air shifted. Around him, in the way the silence itself seemed to respond. For the first time since this began, her fear did not disappear, but it changed. It became something sharper, something focused, something that understood the scale of what she had stepped into. She took a breath, then moved. Slowly, deliberately, she stepped into the car. The moment she sat down, the door closed behind her with a soft, final sound. Lucien followed a second later, sliding into the seat beside her. The driver closed his door, moved to the front, and within seconds, the car began to move. The city did not return. The streets remained empty as they drove, the world outside passing by like something distant and unreachable. Emily sat still, her hands resting in her lap, her mind racing through everything she had learned and everything she still did not understand. Beside her, Lucien remained silent, his presence steady, controlled, but no longer distant. And as the car disappeared into the night, Emily Carter realized that whatever had begun with a simple mistake at a table was no longer something she could step away from. It was something she had been pulled into, and it was only just beginning. The car moved through the empty streets without slowing, the city around them fading into something unrecognizable. Emily Carter watched through the window, her reflection faint against the dark glass, her thoughts louder than anything outside. The world she knew had not just been left behind. It had been erased, at least for now. No traffic lights changing. No incidents. No late night noise drifting through the air. Just silence, controlled and deliberate, stretching as far as she could see. Beside her, Lucien Voss remained still, his presence steady, as if the movement of the car had no effect on him at all. Emily shifted slightly in her seat, her hands tightening together in her lap. "You said something responded when my blood touched you," she said quietly. The words felt heavier now, no longer just confusion, but a need to understand something that had already begun to shape everything around her. Lucien did not answer immediately. His gaze remained forward, focused on something beyond the glass, beyond the road, as if he were tracking something invisible. "It was not just a reaction," he said after a moment. "It was recognition." Emily frowned, her brows drawing together. Recognition of what? Lucien turned his head slightly toward her, his eyes sharp but controlled. Of a bloodline that should not exist anymore. The words settled into the space between them, heavy and deliberate. Emily felt her breath catch. "That does not make sense," she said. "I am just a waitress. I grew up here. I have never even left the state." Her voice held certainty, because everything she knew about herself was simple, ordinary, real. Lucien studied her, and for a brief moment, something in his gaze shifted again. Not doubt, not disbelief, something closer to calculation. "That is what makes this dangerous," he said. Emily shook her head slightly, trying to anchor herself in something solid. "You are saying there is something in my blood that has been gone for over 100 years, she said. "Then why did no one notice before tonight?" Lucien's expression hardened slightly. "Because it was dormant." The answer came without hesitation. Dormant until it came into contact with mine. The implication landed instantly. Emily felt her chest tighten. "So this only happened because of you," she said. Lucien did not deny it. "Yes." The single word carried no apology, only truth. Emily leaned back slightly, her mind racing as pieces began to shift into place. The reaction in the room. The mark that had appeared and disappeared. The way everyone had felt something she could not explain. This was not random. It had been triggered. "Then that means," she said slowly, "they're not just afraid of me. They're afraid of what I could become." Lucien's gaze held hers for a moment longer this time. Yes. The confirmation came quietly, but it carried more weight than anything else he had said. The car turned then, the motion smooth and controlled, leaving the main road and moving onto a long, empty stretch lined with tall, dark trees. The city lights faded completely, replaced by shadows and silence. Emily glanced outside, her pulse picking up again. "Where are we going?" she asked. "Somewhere protected," Lucien replied. The word protected sounded different now. Not safe, not peaceful, controlled, hidden. As the car continued forward, a structure began to take shape in the distance. At first, it looked like nothing more than darkness against darkness. Then the details emerged. Stone, height, windows that reflected no light. A building that did not belong to the modern world, yet stood untouched by time. Emily felt her breath slow as the realization settled in. "That is your home," she said quietly. Lucien did not respond with words. He did not need to. The car slowed as it approached the entrance, large gates already opening before they reached them, as if the place itself had been waiting. The vehicle passed through without stopping, the gates closing silently behind them, sealing the outside world away. Emily felt it instantly. The shift, the boundary, whatever had been following them, whatever tension had been building in the city, stopped at those gates. But something else replaced it. Something older, heavier. The car came to a stop in front of the entrance, the engine going silent. For a moment, neither of them moved. Emily stared at the building, her reflection faint in the glass once again, but this time, it looked different. Not because she had changed, but because everything around her had. Lucien opened the door first and stepped out, then turned back toward her, his expression unreadable but steady. "This is where we find out what you are," he said. The words were calm, but they carried a finality that made her chest tighten. Emily hesitated for only a second. Then she stepped out of the car, the cold air brushing against her skin again, but this time it did not feel empty. It felt watched. The large doors at the entrance opened slowly as they approached, revealing a dim interior filled with shadows that seemed to move without moving. Emily stepped inside, her heartbeat steady but heavy, her senses sharpening as the space closed around her. Behind her, the doors shut with a deep, echoing sound that traveled through the entire structure. And in that moment, Emily Carter understood something she had not fully accepted before. There was no going back. Whatever had been triggered inside her was no longer hidden. It had been brought into a place that would force it into the light. And this time, there would be no mistake to blame it on. The doors closed behind Emily Carter with a deep, final sound that seemed to echo through the stone beneath her feet. The air inside the estate felt different from anything she had experienced before. Not just colder, not just quieter. It felt aware. Every step she took carried a faint echo, as if the space itself was listening, measuring her presence the same way the vampires in the restaurant had. Lucien Voss moved ahead of her without hesitation, his pace steady, his posture unchanged, as if this place obeyed him in ways she could not yet understand. Emily followed, her heartbeat slow but heavy, her senses sharper than they had ever been. The entrance hall stretched upward into shadow, lit by low, golden light that did not seem to come from any visible source. The walls were lined with stone and old carvings, symbols she did not recognize but felt drawn to all the same. She stopped without meaning to, her eyes catching on one of them. It was faint, almost worn away by time, but something about its shape made her chest tighten. Lucien noticed immediately. He turned slightly, his gaze following hers to the symbol on the wall. "You feel it," he said. It was not a question. Emily nodded slowly, her voice barely above a whisper. "I do not know why." Lucien studied her for a moment, then stepped closer to the wall, his hand hovering just above the carving without touching it. "Because it was not made for most people to understand," he said. Emily frowned slightly, confusion mixing with something deeper. "Then why can I?" she asked. Lucien did not answer right away. Instead, he turned back toward her fully, his expression more focused than it had been since they left the restaurant. "Because your blood remembers what your mind does not," he said. The words settled into her, quiet but heavy. Blood remembers. The idea felt impossible, and yet everything about tonight had already proven that impossible was no longer a limit. Emily took a slow step forward, her eyes still on the symbol. "What is it?" she asked. Lucien's voice lowered slightly. "It is part of an old language, older than the records I mentioned, older than most of what remains of our history." Emily's breath caught. Our history, not human, not hers. The distinction was clear now, even if she did not understand it. "And I can read it," she said slowly. Lucien shook his head slightly. "Not read. Recognize." The correction mattered. Emily felt it immediately. She was not understanding the symbol the way someone reads words. She was feeling it, like something inside her already knew what it meant without needing to. "Translate it." She stepped closer, her hand lifting slightly before she could stop herself. Lucien's voice came quietly, but firm. "Do not touch it yet." Emily froze, her hand hovering inches from stone. Yet, the word stood out. Not never, not forbidden, just not now. She lowered her hand slowly, her pulse steady but intense. "What happens if I do?" she asked. Lucien's gaze did not leave hers. "We find out faster than we are ready for," he said. The honesty in his answer made her chest tighten again. For the first time since arriving, Emily became aware of something else. Not just the space, not just Lucien, others. Subtle, but present. Movement in the shadows above. Footsteps too quiet to echo. As she could not see but could feel. She turned her head slightly, scanning the upper levels of the hall. "We are not alone," she said. Lucien's expression did not change. "No," he replied. "This place is never empty." Emily felt the weight of that settle over her. The difference between the restaurant and this place became clear instantly. The restaurant had been controlled. This place was alive, and whatever lived within it was already aware of her. "Why did you bring me here?" she asked, her voice steadier now, more focused. Not just to keep me away from them. Lucien stepped closer, closing the space between them once again, but this time the feeling was different. Less about protection, more about inevitability. Because this is where the truth cannot hide, he said. Emily held his gaze, searching for something solid in the middle of everything that felt uncertain. And what if I do not want to know the truth, she asked. The question was quiet, but real. Lucien's expression softened just slightly, not with comfort, but with understanding of the weight behind her words. Then you're the only one in this house who still has a choice, he said. The answer surprised her. It did not feel like a lie. It felt like something rare in a place built on power and control. Emily let out a slow breath, her eyes drifting back to the symbol on the wall. The pull was still there. Stronger now, not demanding, calling. She knew it without understanding how. Whatever was hidden inside her, whatever had been dormant for so long, this place was not going to let it stay that way. She looked back at Lucien, her voice quiet but steady. If I touch it, everything changes, does not it? Lucien did not look away. Yes. The single word carried more weight than anything else he had said. Emily nodded once, slowly, as if accepting something she could not yet fully define. Around them, the shadows seemed to shift again, watching, waiting, as if the entire estate had paused for this moment. And in the quiet space between fear and curiosity, Emily Carter realized something that settled deeper than anything before. This was not just about discovering what she was. It was about deciding whether she was ready to become it. Emily Carter stood in front of the ancient carving, her breath slow, her heart steady in a way that surprised even her. The pull had not faded. It had grown stronger, clearer, no longer a distant sensation, but something that felt like a quiet voice inside her, guiding her forward without force. She looked at the stone one last time, then lifted her hand again. This time, she did not hesitate. Lucien did not stop her. He did not move. He only watched. Her fingertips touched the surface. The reaction was immediate. Not violent, not overwhelming, but absolute. A soft light spread beneath her skin, starting at the point of contact and flowing upward along her arm like something waking after a long sleep. The symbols on the wall responded, glowing faintly, their worn edges sharpening, lines revealing themselves that had not been visible before. Emily gasped softly, not in fear, but in recognition. She did not read the symbols. She understood them, not with words, with certainty, memory without memory. The hall shifted, the shadows stilled. The presence she had felt before did not move closer. It held back, watching, waiting, as if something older than all of them had just returned. Emily pulled her hand back slowly, her breath uneven now, her pulse steady but heavy with something new, something real. She turned to Lucien, her eyes searching his. I know what it is, she said. Her voice was quiet, but it carried a certainty that had not been there before. Lucien stepped closer, his gaze locked onto hers, sharper than ever. Tell me, he said. Emily swallowed, the knowledge settling into place as she spoke. It is not just a language. It is a mark, a blood oath, a bond that was meant to disappear. Lucien's expression hardened slightly. Meant to disappear, he repeated. Emily nodded. It was broken a long time ago. Destroyed. That is what everyone believed. But was not destroyed. It was hidden. Her voice steadied as she continued, the words coming more easily now, as if they had always been there waiting for her. Passed down. Protected. Waiting for the moment it would be needed again. Lucien studied her, every word pulling something deeper into focus. And what does it do, he asked. Emily held his gaze, her chest tightening slightly as the final piece settled into place. It binds power, she said, not just between two people, between bloodlines, between worlds. Her voice lowered slightly, the weight of it pressing into the space around them. It chooses who stands above all others. Silence followed, not empty, not uncertain, final. Lucien did not look away. His presence did not waver. But something in the air shifted, as if even this place recognized what had just been revealed. Emily felt it too. The understanding. The truth she could no longer step away from. That is why they reacted, she said softly. Not because I am dangerous. Because I am something they cannot control. Lucien's gaze sharpened slightly, but his voice remained calm. And what does that make you, Emily Carter? The question was not simple. It was not rhetorical. It was a line being drawn. Emily took a slow breath, the answer already there before she spoke. It makes me the one they were waiting for, she said. The words settled into the hall, and this time, nothing shifted in response. No tensión, no resistance, only stillness, as if the truth itself had settled everything. Lucien stepped closer, stopping just in front of her, his voice low but steady. Then you understand what happens next, he said. Emily nodded once. They will not stop, she said. Not now. Not after this. Lucien's expression did not change. No, he agreed. They will not. Emily held his gaze, her fear no longer controlling her, replaced by something stronger. Clarity. Then neither will I, she said. The answer came without hesitation, without doubt, and in that moment, something shifted between them. Not power, not control, recognition, equal in a way neither of them had expected when this began. Lucien inclined his head slightly, not as a king, but as something older than titles. Then we move forward together, he said. The words were not a command. They were a decision. Emily let out a slow breath, the weight of everything settling in a place, no longer overwhelming, no longer unknown. Just real. Behind them, the shadows remained still. The watchers did not move. The estate did not react. Because the moment had passed. The choice had been made. And as Emily Carter stood in the center of a world she had never known existed, she understood one final truth. She had not served the wrong table. She had found the right one. And from that moment on, nothing in that world would ever be the same again.